Morena tātou, and welcome to series number 8 of our Progressive Home Ownership webinar series. Today we are delighted and very grateful to have 4 experts that can support any of the kōrero that you have today. And we have Lisa Nathan from Orca Business Solutions, Jason Ruru from Luminite Financial Group, Tammy Tauroa from Hapai Solutions, and Janice Thompson from New Zealand Housing Foundation. So welcome to all of you this morning. The Progressive Home Ownership Fund is a $400 million fund that the current government has put up to help families, especially Māori and Pacifica and whānau with children, to support them into more affordable housing solutions. The program itself works by providers taking on loans for a 15-year period from the government and then partnering with individuals, families and whānau to assist them to access home ownership through these arrangements, such as shared ownership, rent to buy or lease to hold. Today we will look at how we can help whānau into these solutions. So the centre of all the work that we do should be whānau centred. So today I'm pleased to be able to facilitate the kōrero today and look at ways to support whānau through this process, but also the work that needs to be done with whānau to ensure that they succeed in achieving their aspirations to home ownership. So first of all, I'd like to introduce Lisa. So Lisa from Orca Business Solutions. Lisa provides financial capability training to whānau and is part of the sorted kāinga order mahi in the country. Kia ora, Lisa. I'll hand it over to you.
Kia ora, Ellie, and kia ora whānau. Tēnei te mihi atu kia koutou katoa I te taha tupu pāpā no te whānau matauri, me pataruru, ko ngā puhi me Ngāti Raukawa, ona iwi, I te taha tupu whaia, no Mamaranui Kaihu, me Maunganui ia, ko Ngāti Whātua, me Ngāti Kahu, ona iwi, ko Lisa Nathan ahau, and kia ora to everybody here today. Okay, so just a little bit about the mahi that my organisation does. Orca Business Solutions, we're an education provider based in Tāmaki Makaurau, and 2 areas of education we facilitate in is financial capability and home ownership education. So these are the programs we have either delivered or currently delivering out there in the community. The Sorted Kāinga Order program is one we are currently delivering at this point in time, which is a program developed between TPK and the Commission for Financial Capability. And we also facilitate the Certificate of Money Management Program for Te Wānanga o Aotearoa throughout the Tāmaki Makaurau Rohe. He Papa Pūtea, another financial capability program we delivered on behalf of MWDI, and Welcome Homes First Steps. Really, it was a program there was a financial capability component, but it was about putting family into home ownership, and that was through Housing New Zealand. And we also developed our own program, the Blueprint Home Ownership Education Program, that takes you whānau through the process of not only just the financial capability, but also the nuts and bolts when it comes to the home buying processes, like sales and purchase agreements, negotiations, building our homes, maintaining a healthy home. And then also we're a accredited sorted provider for the Commission for Financial Capability. So that's some of the mahi that we do out there. But another hat I also wear is on the Education and Communications Working Group for the PHO program, for this particular program. And most of you should be aware in terms of why this program was established. And it was established to help whānau into the first homes, particularly whānau who did not have enough deposits saved. And there is different PHO products out there that really do address that issue. Advantages for whānau, they get full privileges of home ownership without having to fund 100% of the cost itself. I mean, shared equity, shared ownership is an example. So again, there's a benefit tied with looking at PHO. It gives whānau the ability to service a smaller mortgage that is more affordable on the budget. Okay, so there is ability to get your foot on the property ladder, on the home ownership ladder. Whānau will be able to move into a new house or home that meets regulatory requirements. So part of the purpose of PHO was to also increase housing stock, the supply of housing stock. So with that in mind, it is expected that whānau will be moving to a new home that will meet those requirements. And also the additional benefit for whānau in terms of PHO is pastoral care support provided to whānau in purchasing their home, particularly in looking at purchasing the remaining share within the 15-year period. So those are some of the advantages for whānau. Now, in order for whānau to be able to take advantage of PHO, they need to be home loan ready. And that is to ensure that it gives the banks comfort that you have the ability to be able to pay back their mortgage, but also to be able to service your current household budget, your current debt levels, but it also shows your financial capability, and it gives banks the comfort that you are equipped to be able to manage your finances. So one of the programs I wanted to talk about in a little bit more detail is the Sorted Kainga Order program, which is an existing program that is delivered out there in the community, of which we deliver it primarily in Tamaki Makaurau online, and was asked at the beginning of the year to extend our delivery out to Waiariki regions and to Te Taihawaru regions as well. So again, co-developed between the Commission for Financial Capability, TPK. It is facilitated by approved providers. You do need to contact your local TPK office to find out who is delivering it in their region, in your region. The program itself is actually 8 modules covered over an 8-week period normally, and throughout that 8-week period, you have one-on-one facilitation support. And at the end of that 8-week period, we have what we call one-on-one navigation support. And that generally lasts for 3 months in terms of that support. Now, the whole purpose of that support is to be able to help whānau implement the financial plan that they'll be developing on this particular program. So part and parcel of being able to achieve home ownership is being able to have financial control. And by having financial control means that you can then achieve your goal towards either getting rid of debt, if that's one of your goals you need to address in order to be able to be home loan ready, or putting a goal in place to make sure you've got enough deposit. And the good thing about PHO, you do not necessarily have to have a 20% deposit, which is what the standard lending criteria requires, a 20% deposit. Now let's get into briefly, I'll go into the modules that are covered over that period of 8 weeks. Now this is the first one here, and we do focus on the housing continuum. And so part of the housing continuum here is really looking at, in terms of our focus is on this purple area here. This is what we call the affordable housing. So we do talk about rent to own. We do talk about shared ownership. In fact, we bring in guest speakers, and the likes of the wonderful Janice, who's a speaker here tonight. She's been one of our guest speakers on our program, and bringing in those different community housing providers into the delivery of the program, whānau can then be exposed to what options are out there. We do talk about papa kāinga. Now, I just want to bear in mind it's not a papa kāinga program, but whānau tend to ask a lot of questions around papa kāinga, and you still need to be financially ready and sort of to be able to take advantage of being able to build on a papa kāinga. Kiwi Build is another area that we talk about as part of module 1. Now, module 2 is where we start getting into more about the spending beliefs, getting our whānau to reflect upon their habits when it comes to making financial decisions. Their good habits, their bad habits, their ugly habits. How do we change their ugly habits, their bad habits into good habits? And so this is where we start introducing to them some wonderful tools, and I'll go through those tools very shortly on the Sorted website. And in this way, being able to actually educate our whānau on the usage of these tools, they'll be able to then take control on certain areas of their financial areas of financial priorities. The other thing we talk about here is around the importance or your ability to be able to create intergenerational wealth and well-being through home ownership. And for many of our whānau, that's been the primary purpose as to why they want a home. It's about legacy. It's about putting forward an intergenerational asset, and also peace of mind and security. Let's get into number 3, money plans. This is where we start getting into more the budgeting processes. This is where we start getting our whānau to start analysing their bank statements, getting them to reflect on where the money's going. And it's an eye-opening experience for many of our whānau. Don't really realise where they're putting their money until they go through this type of exercise, and then they often are astounded how much money they're spending on takeaways, on food. And then they realise, actually, this has got to change if they're wanting to actually achieve home ownership. So it is a really good reflecting exercise. But we do go through a fictitious budget as a way of whānau being able to develop their own budget. And then we teach them how to use this sorted budgeting tool to be able to do their own budget and to be able to keep a track of that. Number 4. Okay, now getting into motivations money systems. So this is where we go through the process of developing SMART goals or financial goals with whānau, using the SMART concept, which some of you might be familiar with. But also getting to whānau to think about how do they systematise their spending. So putting money systems in place, looking at how they structure their bank accounts. Do they have a credit card? Do they have check accounts, savings account? How is money, which accounts is money going into? Where are they getting split up? Are they getting put into different accounts for different purposes? Okay, so we start getting them to think about that, as well as the concept of compound interest, because that's what they're going to have to pay when they actually get into debt, is compound interest. Number 5, now debt is the number 1 barrier for many of our whānau in terms of achieving home ownership, high level of consumer debt. So the focus here is reduce, ultimately try to get rid of that consumer debt, because that becomes a barrier for whānau to get lending. So we go through the process of actually understanding what the true cost of debt is. Now, often a lot of our whānau, they sign up on a credit contract, they're not even reading the additional fees because they just want the item. So what we do in this module is being able to go through an example of a credit contract, look at all the different fees, get them to calculate that, plus get them to calculate the interest on that debt, to then find out what the true cost is in addition to the amount that they borrowed. And often they are surprised that it costs a lot more. So it is about educating our whānau on how to make those decisions based on information that is out there. Also, how do we reduce the debt? We introduced a couple of debt management strategies, debt consolidation, snowballing, and a couple of fantastic strategies for whānau to get rid of debt ASAP. Number 6, this is where we start getting into saving smart, looking at different types of investments, particularly KiwiSaver, because KiwiSaver is an investment and it's a managed fund. And so it's getting at whānau to understand, well, how does KiwiSaver work? Okay. Are they with the right provider? Who are providers that they're with? What are the returns? And we actually introduced them to some great KiwiSaver tools on the website where they can actually analyse their returns and compare that to other investments or portfolios out there. So that's a really good module as well. Number 7, this is about planning for the unexpected. So this is things like emergency savings. It's also getting to think about a whānau, about the importance of insurance, particularly if you're going to buy a home. Okay, because don't forget, when you buy a home, you've got debt. And so you've got to really think about, in the event that you cannot work or something happens to you, what type of insurance you have in place to be able to ensure that that debt is still paid while you are unable to work. So those are some of the things that we go through as part of that. Wills, okay, the implications or the importance of getting a will, particularly if you're going to buy a house, or even if you've got KiwiSaver, because the implications of not getting will, it's a hoha, because you have to go through a whole lot of court processes and it will cost your estate money to go through that. So get a will, and we'll talk about the implications of not as part of this module. And lastly, power of attorney. Okay, so thinking about you might needing to put a power of attorney. In fact, I did hear one of the speakers, I think it was Chris from Westpac, who said that they would like to work with providers to see if those whānau do have power of attorneys in place. Okay, so again, that's something you might need to think about in terms of being able to meet any PHO criteria. Lucky last here, this is where we wrap up the previous 7 modules to put together the financial plan, or the whānau puts together their financial plan. And then we look at the next steps in terms of ongoing support. So those are the 8 modules that are covered off in that program. Now, just briefly, I will go through. I wanted to actually just show the tools that are available for whānau, particularly looking at the sorted www.whanaorg.nz website here. Now, here are a number of different tools here, and we actually go through all those tools, but I just want to take you to a couple of tools that I think are really important. The budgeting tool in particular is a great tool for whānau to actually save. You can actually sign up and save all of this information against your profile. I'm just going to put some figures in here, monthly, and then you can go ahead and create a budget template asking these questions. I'm just going to skip it for the purpose of this exercise. And then a whole bunch of categories come up that whānau can fill out. And the good thing about that, you can visually see on the right-hand side the impact of your spending in those different categories. So I think this is a really great tool for whānau. Another awesome tool is this mortgage calculator tool, because it will tell whānau whether they can afford a mortgage depending on their household budget. So let me just go and grab that. And so with the mortgage calculator is being able to look at, whānau wanting to actually get some type of level of debt out, they can actually put that information in there. So I'm just going to put here a couple of $100,000 for the purpose of this exercise. Interest rates here, they can source that from interest.co.nz. Here it is here. All the lending institutions around the country, both primary and secondary lenders, have all the interest rates, both floating and fixed rates. Now, whānau might want to think about fixing for long term, but particularly if you're looking at an increasing interest rate environment, which is what we are. So let's hope it doesn't increase further. But look, depending on your budget, will depend on the rates that you might want to fix it. So we put that information here. The term of the loan, 25 to 30 years, but there are other loan structures that you can pay it off a lot more quicker than that. And by putting that information here, then you can then ascertain what your weekly, in this case, weekly repayments are for whānau. On the right-hand side here, what it does, it gives you a visual picture over that 25-year period. That's the principal you took out, the amount you borrowed. You actually pay $186,000 interest over 25 years, total amount you pay. So then it gives whānau an idea, okay, this is what I pay over that period of time. So those are a couple of great tools that whānau can use. Now, just lastly, I know I've probably overstepped my time, so aroha mai if I have. I just wanted to wrap it up with just talking about PHO providers and what they need to think about, and particularly thinking about your pre-selection and selection processes for whānau who are eligible for the PHO. Because what you're going to have to think about, it's going to be like a bit of a funnel effect. You're going to have a lot of inquiries coming in. Everyone wants to actually hop on board this product because they want to get into a home, which is fair enough. But you're going to have a funnel effect. You're going to have all these inquiries, and all of a sudden you're going to have a few that will meet that criteria that you're going to have to then think about, okay, how do we select that when you might have a limited amount of development or houses to be able to offer? So again, these are some of the practical considerations, but also building your internal financial capability and facilitation, mentoring skills of your kaimaki if you're wanting to develop or deliver financial capability yourself, and implementation of your annual financial health check. That's something that I know Housing New Zealand, Housing Foundation, does, and no doubt probably Janice will talk further. 3 takeaways, okay? whānau, one of them is PHO is a good way for whānau to achieve home ownership. Look, there are some really great things about the product. Yeah, there is some things that I'm thinking, oh, there'll be some challenge for our whānau, but overall, it is a good product for you to consider. Sort of Kainga Ora is a great program for developing financial capability for whānau to achieve home ownership, and that is out there for whānau to take advantage of. And lastly, PHO providers really do need to think about your internal processes, systems for providing support to whānau. And that's me. Those are my contact details. I believe Cooper will be sending out all that information anyway. So aroha mai for being over time. I knew it was going to happen. So kia ora koutou katoa. Ngā mihi.
Oh, thank you, Lisa. A very informative presentation there. So some of our key messages, I guess, from Lisa are around being ready, being home loan ready, and the measures that from a legal perspective, and some of the systems, the money systems that are required to support our whānau to reach this aspiration. Just a couple of quick questions, Lisa. Is the sorted Kainga Ora program delivered online as well as Kanohi ki te Kanohi?
I mean, I mentioned that I do deliver it online. Not all providers around the country deliver it online. Most is actually Kanohi ki te whānau delivery, which is fantastic. I think there might be one or two providers around the country that do the online, and hence the reason why I was asked to actually extend to the different rohe, because Waiariki, Te Tai Hauaru, particularly whānau who prefer to actually be educated online. And so again, it is offered both face-to-face as well as online.
Oh, ka pai. So you would be prepared to deliver online in Rotorua? We do have a question about when will it get to Rotorua? Or do you know of another provider in Rotorua that could support whānau in that?
Look, I'm going to be honest with you. I know this year, because last year there was like 25 sort of kāinga order programs delivered to whānau throughout the country for the last financial year. This year, there's only 5. And so I don't know what happened with TPK funding. So all I'm going to say is go to your local office, advocate for your office to actually speak to the head office to talk about additional funding made available for sort of kāinga order. And particularly if you're promoting this in the PHO program, it would be great to get whānau educated now, because it might take you a year, even longer, 18 months. Before you get into home ownership, or even longer than that. But the point of the matter, they need to have the education now to be able to take advantage when the opportunity does arise. So my encouragement, go to your local TPK office and say, hey, we would like sort of kāinga order delivered in our region in this financial year, so that our whānau can take advantage of when the PHO products are ready for them to be made available to them. So.
Okay, so under the sort of kāinga order program, how long does the support last?
So what's being funded, because it's funded through TPK, well, that is the current funding is through TPK, but if PHOs decide to come on board, they've got funding already provided to them to actually facilitate their own program or facilitate SKO separately if TPK is not, funding is not available. Now, sorry, what was the rest of your question again there, Ali? I just forgot it.
No, that's ka pai. And just finally, is there a cost to whānau, and how long does your support?
Oh, the support. Now, we've funded to provide support 3 months post-delivery, but that's what we're funded to do, but the reality is that it still continues. You know, we've got whānau still ringing us up 6 months later, 9 months later, and saying, oh, Lisa, I've got a sales and purchase agreement and I don't know what to do. And so we still help regardless of the funding only for a 3-month period. So whatever it takes to get you into home ownership, if we do our program, we'll support you all the way through. So that's my whakaaro on that.
Ka pai. Thank you, Lisa, again for your very informative presentation. And if there are any more questions, I'm sure the team at Te Matapahi will be able to connect you directly with Lisa, or feel free to contact Lisa directly.
Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you. So next we have Jason Ruri. So Jason is a mortgage advisor, and Jason comes from Luminai Financial Group and supports whānau to access bank loans and advises on affordable loan structures. Kia ora, Jason.
Kia ora koutou, everyone. Ko Jason taku ingoa. Like Ali said, I'm a mortgage advisor here at Luminate Finance up in Auckland. I'm originally from Rotorua, and I whakapapa from all sides of the lake. Ngāti Pikiao, Tūhaurangi, Ngāti Wahio, and then on the western side of the lake, Ngāti Rangi Wiwihi. Today I'm going to be talking, a few things following on from Lisa around, when she's got clients home loan ready, that's when they normally are passed on to me to try get their finance in line. So, my passion is helping Māori into homes. And the question is why use a mortgage broker? Well, why me personally? The main thing is our people want to deal with our own people. They, it's about pro-choice and being comfortable and not having any judgment. The other thing I do for my clients is, break things down into simple, plain, and easy to understand language. And the last one is, getting their trust and them knowing that I'm going to do the best for them. So on the slide, I've got a few points up there of, of why to use a mortgage broker. You know, the first one is knowledge and experience. You know, to give you a bit of background, I've been helping, you know, clients into homes for the last 16 years. You know, started my journey in the Westpac Rotorua branch, you know, as a teller, worked my way through all the roles, then made a move up to Auckland in 2011. And that's where I started looking after working in the private banking, looking after New Zealand's most wealthy clients. So got a broad range of experience. So, you know, from simple transactions of helping people into, you know, their first home to, you know, people who own multiple properties. The second point is there's a lot of red tape when buying a home. You know, my job is to make it easy. You know, there's been a lot of legislation, regulatory requirements introduced over the last couple of months. And, you know, my job is to know these inside out and know how to make this as simple as possible for you. I touched on it before, you know, converting what you tell me into bank language. The language you use and how you phrase it is really important. And I'm going to use a simple example. I'm going to call this fella John. You know, he provides full-time charity work, doesn't get any money for it. You know, which phrase has a more positive impact? John is currently unemployed, or John spends his time working with the following charities. You know, so you really got to put positive connotations when you're telling a story to the bank. And the other thing it does is it gives you the best chance of an approval. You know, using a mortgage advisor, you have access to multiple lenders. This gives you choice. You know, most people who apply directly with their bank, and if they're knocked back, will generally give up and not go any further, when the reality is maybe there are other options with other banks. You know, my knowledge and experience with lenders means, you know, I know from pretty much the get-go who's going to be the best provider for you. You know, we negotiate the best interest rates for you. The reason being is we know what's happening in the market, and you know, the banks are not going to try pull the woolies over our eyes. And, you know, coming back to, you know, explaining bank language and jargon in plain, simple English to you, you know, it's really important, you know, that I explain all this complex terminology. There's a lot of jargon, there's a lot of red tape, so that you understand it. So, you know exactly what you're doing. You feel comfortable about throughout the whole process. And I look after you through the whole home buying process. You know, it's not just about getting finance. You know, a lot of the time I'm helping my clients through the home hunting process, saying, oh, yep, this will be a good property for the bank. Or maybe it isn't, or this is what we should do, right through to the negotiation stage, because that's quite daunting, especially with auctions. You know, just giving a few simple tips on how to read an auction room can mean the difference of you getting a good deal or not. And in most cases, the service is free to you. If it isn't, you know, you'll be told up front. So one of the biggest changes to legislation over the last couple of months is the bank's affordability criteria. It's become really, really tough. And, you know, we're having to work hard to try, you know, get a deal across the line. To give you a general idea of the impact, you know, if you applied for a home loan 3 months ago and you were pre-approved for $700,000, if you apply today, this could be reduced down to $500,000. So that's quite a material difference. And, you know, again, it could be the difference of you getting into a home or not. And I come back to my previous point on the previous page. You know, I have access to multiple lenders and know who will be the best fit for you. And on this page, I've given a simple scenario here based on a couple of banks' current affordability calculators. Now, these are real banks, but I'm not going to name them there. So, you know, like I said, the scenario is here. We've got a couple wanting to purchase a home. They've got annual incomes of $50,000 and $60,000 respectively. And the only debt they've got is a credit card with a $10,000 limit. Bank A will give a loan of up to $600,000, while Bank B will give a loan of up to $650,000. Now, it might not seem that much, but like I said, it could be the difference of you getting into a home or getting into the home that you want. Spending habits are important. You know, they give a background of your character, your history, and like I said, your spending habits, and that can really impact how much you can borrow. So there are two components here. The first one is your credit check. Most of us know what these are. And the second one is your bank statements. Both provide a plethora of information about you to the lender. So the first one, if we're going through your credit checks, is, lets a lender know who you have been applying finance with. It lets us know if you have any defaults or collections. If you know what a default or collection is, I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but it's where you haven't paid your debts off. And these will stay on your credit check for 5 years. One thing I will note is if you have these on your credit check, it doesn't necessarily mean you won't get into a home. There are other lenders outside of banks who will underwrite these loans, but it is at a higher interest rate. The other thing that the credit check does, and a lot of people don't know this, is that it provides a 2-year repayment history on your loans, credit cards, and utilities. So if you have repayment issues, the question becomes, why didn't you pay your bills on time, and what has changed since then? The second component, like I said, was bank statements. Bank statements really tell a lot about you. It tells lenders whether you have been paying your bills on time, and this could be down to things like, have you got automatic payment failures, dishonors, or unarranged overdraft fees? If you do, then we need to fix these before you apply to the lender for a home loan. And it could be as simple as getting all of your bills coming out at the same time as your pay, or setting up a bills account. The other thing with the recent law changes that I announced on the previous slide, lenders are also looking at exactly how much you are spending on everything. This is right down to, your $3 coffee at the BP. If you have high discretionary spending, which could be dining out, entertainment, personal care, expensive groceries, this is what can impact how much you can borrow from the bank. So if you are a high spender, you're spending everything that's in your account, then what I would do before we apply for a home loan is I might ask you or I'll probably tell you, you need to cut back on your expenses for 3 months before we can apply for a home loan to demonstrate that you can live on less money. Another big component when we're going for finance is around your deposit. And this could come from savings, KiwiSaver first home withdrawal, Kāinga Order first home grant, or the bank of mum and dad. And that could be whether they give you a gift or using their home as security for you. And this is probably where I step in a little bit different from the Kāinga Order offer that's going on at the moment. A lot of us don't realize we can buy a home based on the current savings we have in place, especially if you've been contributing to KiwiSaver for a few years. It may mean that you can actually apply and get a home loan under normal bank criteria and not have to go through the shared ownership structure. And there are low deposit options out there. So generally, if you meet the Kāinga Order home grant criteria that's listed above or on the slide, then we could look to apply under the Kāinga Order first home loan criteria, where you only need a 5% deposit. So using the Auckland numbers on the slide for an existing house at 625,000, that means you'd only need a 5% deposit, which equates to 31,250. If you fall outside of the Kāinga Order first home criteria, then you could look to get a home loan with your existing bank with a 10% deposit. So again, if it was a $625,000 purchase price, that's a deposit of $62,500. So if you've been in that KiwiSaver for a number of years, it's likely, between you and your partner that you've already got more than that anyway. So the key takeaways for me is using a mortgage advisor gives you choice. The second one, banks have different criteria. We know who will be the best fit for you. And number 3, simple, pay your bills on time and what you're spending. And the next slide has my contact details.
Kia ora, Jason, and thank you for that very informative presentation. So I think some of the key takeaways also include, for me, when we're talking about whānau, is you use the term looking after, which I think is really key for many whānau who are new in this area, and being taken care of and being understood from a strength-based position is the support that many of our whānau fail to receive. from some providers in this, especially in this area of financial support. So thank you for that, Jason. Could you just talk to us about some of the biggest challenges you're facing at the moment in this area?
Yeah, the biggest challenges I'm facing at the moment, and I touched on them lightly in the presentation, is around the affordability criteria set by banks. It's having a massive impact on what people can borrow. And the example I use is, like I said, if you could have had a pre-approval for 700,000 3 months ago, and it might be down to 500,000 now. And so, you're like, well, actually, what can you buy in Auckland for 500,000? Using the Auckland market as an example, there's not a lot out there in that price range. So it's really, so that's one of the biggest challenges. And the second one is, and I think this is short term at the moment, is a lot of the banks have really tightened up on their criteria for people who've got less than 20% deposit at the moment. To give you an example, ANZ has or closed their door for anyone who's got less than 20% deposit at the moment, including their existing customers. So it's trying to navigate through those challenges at the moment.
So what are you doing for whānau and clients to overcome some of these challenges that you've mentioned?
Yeah, this is, for me, this is, almost similar to what Lisa's doing with her clients, getting them ready. It's really getting their spending under control, because like I said, it has a real big impact on how much you can afford. It's as simple as going to my whānau. I want you living on baked beans for the next 3 months. I don't want you going for the free spins on the pokies. So it's really cutting out all that excessive expenditure, because like I said, what it might do is it might give them an extra $50,000 to $100,000 dollars, on their purchase price, and it makes the biggest difference for them.
Oh, that's great. So just in terms of the mahi that you do, are you available to people around the country, or are you only available in specific parts of the country? No. So I'm definitely available across the country. Obviously, it's harder doing face-to-face, but, we've got the great invention of Zoom, which makes it easier. I've helped whanaunga back down in home in Rotorua get into a home. And so, to give you an idea, that was, not all of our transactions for whānau are simple. But that's where my expertise comes in to, get them across the line. That's great. Well, thank you, Jason, for that. And I think for many whānau, being able to have, the bank and finance speak being translated for them in a way in which they can understand would be, hugely appreciated for many, because often that is a huge barrier for our whānau. So once again, thank you for your presentation. And again, if there are any questions following today's webinar, I'm certain the Te Matapihi team can support you to make contact with Jason. Thank you. Kia ora. So next up, we have Tammy Tauroa from Haupai Solutions. So Tammy is part of an organisation that works very closely with whānau through every stage of their home ownership journey. Putting whānau at the centre of this process is hugely welcome by many, just simply because of the understanding and the support that they require to progress into home ownership. So, morena Tammy, and kia ora, I'll hand it over to you.
Kia ora mai tātou katoa. Tēnā rā tātou kua hakarau I ka mai ki raro I te tuanui o tēnā o nā tātou kaupapa. Tammy Tauroa, Ngāti Kuri, he uri a hau no te tai tokirau. Ko te hāpua te papakainga I tēnei wā tonu, e noho ana hau ki raro I hoi te maru o maunga tautari ki Pohara Marae, ki roto o Waikato, ki roto o Tainui Waka. So tēnā rā tātou katoa. I'm going to attempt to keep what is usually a 1.5 hour sort of wānanga koho to 10 minutes. And I know that's a challenge that we're all experiencing when we received the tono to attend today. So I'm going to give my best I'm going to disclaim that this is not going to be a technical coho because there just isn't enough time. So I've positioned the kōrero hopefully as more of the why. Why do we do the things that we do? And what does that look like in terms of a whānau context? Today, I'm really just speaking as a project lead for Papa Kāinga within Ngāti Koro ki Kahukura that I was involved in and helped the iwi of Ngāti Koro ki Kahukura to establish. The mahi really came about through a couple of years of land diversity work and alternative land use. And we looked at ways to uplift the potential of whenua Māori. So a lot of my work at the time was predominantly with the managing director, Willie Te Aho. And through that mahi, we started to canvass other opportunities. One of the important points I want to note is that when we started looking at business and commercial opportunities of the whenua, it became really clear that we can have all of these opportunities, but kei whio tātou whānau, where are our people? And so that became, I suppose, a really core part, fundamental part of our mahi. We came to the kaupapa, nā runga i te whakatauki o Kingi Tāwhiao, which is kia mai ki te whenua hei Papa Kāinga mō Ake Tonu, hold fast to the land as a place to stand forevermore. Now that's a huge kaupapa kōrero, but I just noted that because it did set the direction by which our home ownership model would be established. So our kaupapa, I'm just acknowledging there's diverse housing realities. Our whānau face many, an array of challenges in terms of access to housing, and Lisa presented beautifully the part of the continuum, the housing continuum, and we know we sit across that. So basically, our kaupapa was about home ownership and predominantly first home ownership, but at the heart of that was Papa Kāinga, and what does Papa Kāinga look like? So this is an iwi-driven opportunity, but a whānau-led process and program. So you can see on the screen some high-level parts of the Papa Kāinga, and I'm just trying to note, you can read this yourself hopefully, but a key part of that is this Papa Kāinga is the first in our district. We are the first application to be fully subdivided and on general freehold land title. We fought the definition through council of Papa Kāinga, and we reverted back to the national policy statement for articulation when we went to a full hearing for our kaupapa. But we were successful, and we navigated the complexities of that mahi. This is just sort of like a quick high-level overview of the timeline. You can see that we sort of went through feasibility, the feasibility kaupapa, which included actually talking to our whānau and asking, what are your aspirations for being in kāinga? At the time, there was the emergence of this terminology called the housing crisis. And so our response really was to, I'll put it in the words of Willie Te Aho, get shit done. So there's a lot of talking, but actually we knew that it was important to just mahia te mahi hei painga mō te iwi. So we called for expressions of interest and basically just wanted to get an understanding. This disclaiming is based on the needs at the time from Ngāti Koro ki Kahukura when we first started putting out the feelers in terms of housing. Then we developed an approach and we sought funding from the tribe Kei Te Mihi Kia Waikato Tainui, nā rātau I koha mai tahi mone. Waikato Tainui supported in part of the feasibility study, and that gave us the opportunity to do some of the groundwork in terms of site topology, engaging Māori experts, Māori architecture, and really integrating and utilising the concepts from start to finish around what a Papa Kāinga means to us here within Ngāti Koro ki Kahukura. Then we finally positioned ourselves, and as I said, we had to go through a whole resource consent process, and that led us to the support from Te Puni Kōkiri in terms of full infrastructure funding. So we made an infrastructure application to Te Puni Kōkiri to support the establishment of 11 homes, and we were successful in that, and that supported us to navigate the complexities of start to finish home ownership. I'm just also going to stress I'm not a home ownership expert. I'm not a housing expert. Actually, I just had a passion to advocate for whānau in terms of housing and recognise that, if I could do it, other whānau can do it. There's a lot of champions and leaders within Te Ao Māori and our iwi and our hapu and our whānau. And sometimes we get a little bit put off. We have self-doubts. Sometimes we're our own worst enemy, in my view, in terms of, what our abilities are. So I just feel like if this message can be sent to iwi, hapu and whānau to know that you don't actually have to be a housing expert to influence the space and influence the direction of your whānau. So long as you have the determination, passion, and drive and follow through. That's what's required in this kaupapa. So we had to, I actually had to walk through with whānau from start to finish, and that included brokers. The reality is, whānau, that not all banks are your friends. So I agree with the kōrero previously with Jason around, it is really important to get financial advisors. It is really important to get the right brokers. Because there are huge complexities. Actually, there's institutional racism. And so when you present yourself and your kaupapa up, it can be a hard road, especially if you use papa kāinga. Some of these concepts in terms of financial lending institutions are really complicated and complex. And so we actually had to break that down for our whānau. One thing that we did was we were really clear that you sometimes have to be a shield for whānau, because you don't want whānau to experience the barrage of all of these mounting pressures, complexities, policies, provisions. So sometimes you have to be that shield for your whānau, and then you communicate backwards what needs to be shared and what they need to come forward with. So at the end of the day, we had to actually broker a partnership as a iwi organisation directly with a bank. We're very fortunate that Westpac came to the table through Fontaine Moses Te Kani and really helped us to cut through that pathway. And that's when we engaged the financial advisor who worked on behalf of each whānau. They came in after the brokering of that relationship occurred, just because of the nature of our papa kāinga. And when you're a first of its kind, you have to be a real toki. You have to be a real toki sometimes, and just shake everything until something falls that's the right fit for your whānau. And then you can see there was a final stage, which was the final works and completion. And again, that's a whole nother kōwhau, because that talks about all the contractors. But this was a full start to move into the house kaupapa kōrero. Just quickly, our approach and who we took with us, you can just see the first people we take with us is our whānau. So one of the other things I just want to advocate for and really emphasize is that kei a mātou te mātauranga kia eke ki roto i ngā kāinga. We have the foundations and the platforms and the values that will get us into our own Māori housing solutions. So that includes one method is wānanga, kōrero with our whānau. Part of the approach within our wānanga, first and foremost, is about whakapapa, connection and identity. That was a big part of our papa kāinga. Kaupapa was about whakapapa, not just whakapapa i a koe ki te whenua, you to the land, but actually whakapapa in terms of connection to the kaupapa. The second part of that was around whanaungatanga, getting to know each other, getting to work with each other again as a whānau. Noho kotahi, wete, wānanga, interrogate some of the criteria that we're developing as a papa kāinga so that we can familiarise ourselves with each other again. We can't just assume that put everybody together and it's going to be a great world. That's just not the reality. So the third part of the wānanga experience I wanted to mention was manaakitanga. And manaakitanga is not just nice, fluffy, care about each other, I love you cousin, but it's actually about manaakitanga i te kaupapa, to protect and look after the kaupapa. And for us, that's papa kāinga's, it's an ongoing thing. You don't just put up a house and ko koe tēnā. It's actually an ongoing reciprocal relationship that you have and your obligation to, as a whānau member, to the whole kaupapa, and that's what our whānau did. The iwi created a first of its kind lifetime opportunity. So I just wanted to note our model actually didn't require any deposits because the land that was presented became the equity. And so we leveraged sort of like a shared equity model, but full retention and ownership to whānau, with iwi retaining a lifetime interest. And that goes back to the first slide, which is kia mau ki te whenua, hei papa kāinga moa ke tonu. We engage experts, the best of the best, get the best people for the mahi, get the people who have experience in this field, so that, you know, we had a 2-year time frame from the very start of the idea into moving in. You know, whānau, we've got to get out of this. It takes 5 years to build. Our whānau don't have 5 years. That's the reality. We have to actually move, and you know, it's awesome to see some changes in local government, local council, moving across the provisions for papakoanga and at a local government level. So that's warming too. And the organisations were Westpac, TPK, and the Waipa District Council. So, yep, just quickly, you've seen that the land tenure model is new. It's a new legal instrument that we engaged our legal experts to support us with. And then we went into collective negotiations. Like I said, when you're on a 2-year trajectory from the start of an idea to moving whānau in, the easiest way when you've got 11 whānau, I found, was to have one mortgage broker for all whānau, one lawyer for all whānau, one lawyer for the iwi, one financial lending institution, one project leader, and one contractor to do the build. And that meant that I wasn't sending messages to everybody's individual kaupapa. It became really, really time consuming. So if I could impart some wisdom, would be just to go with one and build a relationship with those key experts in the kaupapa. Oh, I just love putting our kids up. That's why this slide is here. But, you know, we can talk about all the technical jargon all we like in terms of papakoanga, but for us, the tamariki are the heartbeat of the papakoanga. I put this up basically because the process of home ownership can sometimes become a little bit sterile, and we actually forget to humanize the experience. So for me, living here, we can have compliance to the resource consent requirements, land use conditions, subdivision, aharane, but actually the tamariki make our papakoanga the papakoanga, because they're in and out of our homes all the time. And I just put, you give way to kids here, because when you come into our papakoanga, you know there's kids running around on scooters, so you're immediately confronted by being very cautious and careful. So I just wanted to show whānau online today. This is our papakoanga. We moved in pretty much 1 year ago. So we've all been living in our homes for 1 year. That's a bespoke wastewater treatment system that we created because our kaupapa was no paru to touch our tupuna awa. And like I said, we have our mātauranga and our solutions within our, within our housing programs. And so we invested up front in a lot of the things that promoted our connection to our whenua, our reorientation to our wellness, which included looking after the whenua that we live on. And so those were key parts of it. So I'm pretty blunt. Here are my 3 key takeaway messages, whānau. The first one is the process in terms of when you're looking after whānau, you're taking your whānau with you. It's rough, it's tough, and it's ugly. So be prepared, but make sure you take your whānau all the way through with you. So communication is the key. For me, another key point was it's an emotionally charged space. So whānau, they often have their hopes and their dreams riding on the kaupapa. They become fully invested in the kaupapa. They give everything they have to have a home. And so, I think kia Māori te titiro, knowing, being, and do from a place of care is really important. And the third thing is advocate unapologetically, but strategically for whānau. Sometimes I am from Te Tai Tokira, and sometimes I get very passionate. But it's also within that is to be strategic about when to fire, but when to hold back, when to restrain, when to have discipline, especially in terms of partnerships, because it can get quite stressful because, you're carrying the emotions of the whānau with us. So the last words of Ngāti Koroki Kahukura, which I loved because this was part of our kaupapa, kia niwhati ngā kau, kia ora ai te iwi. Be resolute so the people flourish. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora, Tammy. A very passionate and motivated presentation. Thank you so much. Your passion is coming through the screen at me, and I love it. and I love that, and I'm sure many other people on here today, that being unapologetic when whānau the success of whānau is the outcome. So thank you for that, Tammy. So as we heard from Tammy, the putting whānau at the centre is key. The approach that they've taken is having whānau first up and having that wānanga and having that kōrero. And I think there's a lot to be learned in that, when often whānau become second or third, you know, down the process or down the system, and then the aspiration of whānau is lost in that. So I think that's a really good takeaway point from today. Also, again, the positive lens that we place on whānau, that's strength-based, and always looking for strengths in whānau that assist them to achieve, and stop looking at those things that are just noise and hoha in the background. So yeah, I'm really with you on some of those things. Some people on here that would know me, so yeah, kia ora, Tammy. I just have a couple of questions for you. How did you facilitate everyone's individual needs through that process?
Yeah, it's really hard. And, you know, one thing is, we know our whānau, and our whānau want independence, and they want to, you know, have their voices heard. And that's really, really important. If you're on a tight time frame and you're working as a collective, whānau also know how to be. And so for this opportunity to occur, we had to just really, through those wānanga, sit down and say, what are the compromises and what can't we compromise in? But in terms of getting to affordability for our whānau, so when I'm talking about affordability, I'm saying 238,000 to 400,000 is the cost for homes at the time we started our kaupapa. And so this is a new way of enabling home ownership for our whānau through the Papakoinga model. And so when we're talking about that, whānau are committed to getting in. So there's a lot of things that were negotiable for whānau. And because we're a Papakoinga, we kept to the integrity of the whenua and made sure that on our Papakoinga, no one had a 5-bedroom or 5-story house that towered over others. You know, when you come in, we all feel like we're part of each other and not too different. And I think that goes back to the pohara way of mahi as well, as kupapa ki raro te tiro ake. You know, have some humility in the mahi that's done, but never lack or strive for excellence in those pursuits. So it's hard, and sometimes you just have to let whānau know, no, this isn't optional, get on, here's the plan, come with us, or maybe it's not the plan for you, you know, and that's the best way to facilitate sometimes when you've got 11 whānau to take with you. Yeah.
Oh, so another question here: what happens to the land if whānau want to move from the Papakoinga site?
Yeah, it's just like a normal house and land package, basically. So, but we have a special land covenant that sits across the whenua, and so any interest or wanting to sell or move, it triggers the covenant model that we have over the whenua. And like I say, it's sort of like the first of its kind in terms of this land tenure model. But it basically stipulates that you give a first right of refusal to the iwi. They have longer than what you would usually take, which is 30 working days. So it's about 2 months, essentially. They have to work it out. And you will remove 1/3 of the share that the iwi put in, essentially. So that's the iwi's interest, that you recognise that the whenua was a gift. So there's a house and land packages. The whenua was a gift, and the iwi won't be buying their own whenua back. And so that's a way that we recycle affordability too. So we've tried to look at ways where we're recycling the model continuously, should that ever happen. And, you know, life happens, eh? So we had to challenge ourselves through the experience too with lawyers, and really we had to sit down and say, you know, do a lot of risk mitigation strategies, especially around the finance and the land title transfer process. And so we had to, the iwi in this sense are a little bit different, because you have some models where the interest decreases until you get full whānau who own all house and land. The iwi in this situation did not want to ever lose their whenua, but we had to make it comfortable enough for Westpac, and it being a house and land package for whānau. So we struck a sort of happy medium whereby the iwi can have a lifetime interest in perpetuity to any new owners buying the whenua as well. So in 2 minutes, that would be my response.
So does Waikato Tainui support registered members into housing ownership?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. So Waikato Tainui for a long time have had programs, had housing and financial capability support programs in place for registered tribal members. I know, I think about 4 of our whānau actually participated in those wānanga ahead of coming and putting their name forward for this kaupapa. I just think whether you're ready or not, going through a program like what Lisa has got is actually fundamental for our whānau, because you can actually learn a lot of those skills and share that with your other whānau and change the lives of other whānau around you once you have those, once you've been walked through those sort of 8 modules that have been stepped out so brilliantly. So, yeah. Waikato Tainui do have those programs on offer if you're registered, and they run every year is my understanding.
So just finally, just around risk management in terms of the development of the papakainga, did you have any risk management plans, and how did you manage the risks that did arise?
Yeah, we had sort of like no-go zones and go zones. And so if there were queries or questions or kaupapa from whānau that they wanted to achieve, but it didn't align to the fundamental 7 basics of the iwi, it wasn't the right kaupapa for them. And so we just acknowledge, hey, this might not be the kaupapa for you, but it's not the end of the opportunities in terms of other housing needs. But you do have to be very real and upfront about what the program is that's been offered. And so whānau, there's no surprises for whānau as well, but a lot of risk management, especially around negotiating lending, especially around negotiating the threshold and tolerance for the bank to whānau receiving mortgages. There's a lot of risk management around the legal sale and purchase agreement side, so the land title and that transaction. There were a lot of risk management around that, and I think it's wrapped up really nicely in our site management plan. So through Wānanga, we developed the site management plan for our papakainga, and we stepped out what our tikanga would be to live with each other. You know, this week, if your month is January the 1st, that's your month for mowing the common lot, you know, areas, and just simple things like that, not to take for granted any of the simple everyday things, because often those nuances is what really can get whānau quite anxious. So yeah.
Oh, kia ora, Tammy. We really thank you for your determination and passion, and appreciate your time today. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
So finally today, whānau, our final speaker is Janice Thompson from the New Zealand Housing Foundation. The Housing Foundation, which is a charitable trust, supports whānau into affordable housing. Morena, Janice.
Morena tātou katoa. Ko Waio, so on my dad's side, ki te tau tōku pāpā, he's whakatāne te teko and poroporo, so I whakapapa to Ngāti Awa. On my mum's side, I whakapapa to Tūhoi and Ngāti Parau. However, I live here in Manirewa, South Auckland, Te Pito o Te Ao. So just wanted to, just a little bit of background about myself. I have been working in the affordable home ownership space for the last 7 years, and I first started in our development in Waimahia Inlet in Weymouth, South Auckland, where we built 295 houses, 2, 3, 4 and 5 bedroom homes. Back then in 2014, you could buy a 3 bedroom home there for around $415,000. Since then, those same 3 bedroom properties are around, probably around the 800,000 mark, between 750 to 800,000. That is how much the growth in those properties have gone. in Waimahia Inlet, with our whānau Māori, what I observed very early on is that although there were lots of opportunities and we were promoting it down there at the development, there's some opportunities to own your own home, we found it very slow for our whānau Māori to come forward. And those that did come had a lot of self-doubt of, can we actually do this? Am I really just dreaming about this? And are you actually a scam? You know, people actually thought that we were a bit of a cowboy outfit, and because, you know, they'd seen stories in the past of people that had been ripped off, and then there might be that they may not have other whānau that they're aware of who actually own their own home. So this is what we faced there, and it wasn't actually until we had the first house up and a whānau move in, and at the time John Key was Prime Minister, and he turned up with his you know, with entourage of media, and then it went through the local rag, and all of a sudden we had lots of people come forward, and even whānau started to believe their own whānau that it actually worked, because there were actually whānau moving in. So it was I guess what I'm saying there is that, especially among our Māori people, I think that it can take a long time. Just everyone's different, but I have noticed among our Māori people, it's the uptake has been very slow, especially up here in the urban centres. In Purnui Park is, I've also been working in Purnui Park, Manukau. Again, it's very, the buildings there are a lot different, where they're 2 and 3 level homes. So, you know, I'm coming from a perspective of, you've got, again, for our whānau Māori, that might have many of us been brought up where you've got a big backyard and a double garage, and, you know, you can play everywhere. Whereas these days, you know, you're coming into a space where sometimes you might not even have a backyard. There might be a shared space, or the neighbouring reserve, you know, might be the area where you might go and take a walk. So and also terraced housing side by side. So sometimes that might put a lot of people off, is that, oh, we don't have our standalone house. Well, what's that, you know? And so then people prefer to continue to rent. So it's all those mindsets that we will be facing when we're working with whānau. And so it is about education, it is about looking at where they're at now, and perhaps seeing it as their first step towards home ownership, of converting their rent into their own asset. And the whānau that we are working with are largely those that are on working incomes as well. They might be earning anywhere between 65 upwards to 110,000. Some of the other work that I do has been in supporting iwi and Māori-led organisations. With Waikato Tainui, I have been working with 15 whānau through the shared ownership program in Te Kārearea in Hamilton. Also with Te Tai Whenua in Waingāko Hastings, Taranaki Opunake, and also working on behalf of Te Tumu Pairoa, the Māori trustee. Some of my work has been also in Wainuiomata, working in the Te Punawai development, and probably one of my most proudest moments was working in Te Puia Marae with one of the whānau who, when I met with her, had come through homelessness, but actually, right, she now owns a 4-bedroom home in Waimahia. So can it be done? Absolutely, it can be. Just takes a plan. And lastly, I have been working in the last 3 years with the New Zealand Police, Counties Manukau, where we have now 8 of their police officers who have come into the shared ownership program. So certainly there's a big need there. Okay, so working with whānau, I'm just going to share some of the important things in working with whānau is analysing the need. What is the need? What are those common themes that are appearing? You know, looking at, if we are working with whānau, it's no good looking at building 2-bedroom or 3-bedroom homes if they're big, large whānau. You know, kind of looking at those, what functions well with our whānau? What are the house typologies? What's the demand? Are people on low incomes or moderate or high incomes? Because that will really determine the types of homes that we can build, and also the affordability of the properties. 2, understanding and assessing the whānau circumstances. So, I have found that it's so important when we're working with whānau, when I've been working with whānau and working with them to complete an application form, and then assessing that. It's all around just understanding, their current financial position and where they are, the direction where they're heading in the next 2 to 3 or 5 years. It's just about working a plan with our whānau that's realistic, a bit like that SMART plan that Lisa was talking about. It's just understanding when we're working with our whānau is what is the best suited product for them, whether it's shared ownership or rent to buy. Rent to buy meaning that if they have debt that's going to take up to 5 years to clear, there's no use in referring them over to the bank at that time. It's better to give them time to work those debts down and build up their deposits. Thirdly, presenting an overview of the product, a pathway. It's important for our whānau to understand what is it exactly what is this pathway we're talking about when we're looking at shared ownership? What does that even mean? And at the end of the day, can I even afford that? So having a tool available, whether it's a PowerPoint presentation, whether it's a spreadsheet that really outlines the costs of what it's going to cost for, if it's rent to buy, what's the rent going to be? What are any other costs involved here? And how do I actually move over into shared ownership? Is there any contribution towards equity to help me to buy the home? All those things should be laid out for the whānau, and having a simple document on a one-pager that's really simple for them to understand is so important. And the same with shared ownership, for our whānau to understand when they finally do move over into shared ownership and buying a home, apart from the mortgage repayments, what about rates, what about house insurance, all those things that we can discuss with our families in detail. And then laying those things out as we move along, any common questions that come up, putting them into a frequently asked questions document so that they can go to that, and that we're improving and learning as we go along. Tailoring a purchase pathway plan in plain speak language. So Jason picked up on this, and that's best suited to the whānau, outlining their shares in the organisation's equity, deposits and bank loan. So as I was saying, that what are those repayments? And working with whānau, and as of some of the whānau that have come through Lisa's program, and some of them, one of them has gone on and now owns a home in Te Kāriarea. It's all those things about being able to lay them out nice and simply so whānau have no surprises later on. I think one of the key things when we're looking at shared ownership is when a whānau does buy back shares, for example, are they going to be buying those shares back at current market value? These are things that are important to discuss up front so that whānau understand what that looks like and how do you actually do that. So the Housing Foundation, we have a few tools to help people understand what buying back, for example, an extra 5% shares looks like, and how do you actually do that. One of the key ways to do that is being able to facilitate an annual review with whānau, once a year meeting with them and having that conversation with them. How are you doing? Checking in with them. Are you in a position to buy back any shares? Let's have a look at what that looks like, and let's talk about the next steps. Having a go-to person. So Tammy talked about having one person, and that's been the case, I think, for whānau, is to be able to have one support person if they've got a query about this and that, rather than trying to navigate their way through a web in an organisation, having a go-to person who they can build up trust with as well. And then, as I said, implementing that annual financial health check to support whānau to buy back shares over time if they're doing the shared ownership program in accordance with their affordability. And so 3 key takeaways is, number 1, understanding the needs of the whānau that you're working with, and being really, you know, for example, if we're just offering shared ownership programs and that requires the whānau to be able to secure that home loan, if they don't meet the criteria of being able to secure finance for the bank, it's important to understand that and to communicate that with them from the beginning, but have a plan ready so that there are some goals for them to work towards. Secondly, assessment and purchase plan, being able to sit down and map things out for the family clearly. And then thirdly, that annual review of meeting with whānau so that they understand where they're at and how to purchase back more shares if they're on the shared ownership program. And here's my contact details here. If you'd like to talk with me further outside of this, you're welcome to contact me. Happy to support. Thank you.
Kia ora, Janice. Thank you for your presentation. And I think there's a common theme here that we've heard today, and that's about whānau understanding exactly what's happening and what the process is through every step of the way. There's also that area of getting an understanding as a provider or a mortgage advisor on what the actual capability of whānau is to enter into the space of home ownership. And I guess the most important part has been the walking alongside whānau every step of the way and getting rid of those barriers and actually advocating for them in a controlled manner, but also just supporting them through those things. So thank you for that, Janice. I just have a question here for you. Where can we find help and support, find help to support us and our whānau with the products that you mentioned?
So apart from our speakers here, they've presented the different pathways. I mean, for the Housing Foundation, they can just go through our website and also myself, so they can give me an email and I can get in touch with them.
Okay. And do you work with Māori freehold land? And is your product available in Tāmaki?
Really, for us, it comes back a bit like what some of our other speakers were talking about. It comes back to the availability of land for us to work with. So, so we only can build on land that's available for us. So we're limited to that pretty much, and the support of funding and our philanthropic investors.
Do you think the PHO fund will help Māori into housing when house prices seem so unaffordable?
Absolutely, yes. Absolutely, yes. I think especially, so the whole point of the PHO is especially if whānau might just need a little bit extra in order to purchase the home. So they might have some deposit, they might be able to secure a home loan, but they might be not have that extra 150,000 or 100,000 to be able to purchase. So absolutely, yes.
Kia ora. Well, thank you for that. So just in ending, thank you to all the participants who have taken the time, I know, out of their busy days. I'm sure that everybody is busy, but for such an important kaupapa, your presence and having you here as part of these webinars is really appreciated. Finally, to our guest speakers, we thank you for sharing your intelligence, your knowledge, and appreciate the kaupapa that you all contribute to supporting whānau aspiration into home ownership. So with that, thank you all and have a great day, and we'll see you all again on December the 13th for the next webinar. Kia ora.